You promised yourself, never again. Never again will I text that toxic ex. Never again will I procrastinate until 3 a.m. Never again will I waste my money. But here you are, doing it again. Why? It's not because you are stupid or weak. It's because your brain is addicted to the familiar chaos. To your subconscious, misery feels safer than the unknown. Today, we break the loop. Concept 1. The Homeostasis Trap. Your brain treats success like a fever. It tries to cool you down back to failure. Your brain runs on a stubborn belief that emotional weather should stay within a familiar range. When a win lands, the reward circuitry gives a nudge, but the brain's danger detectors buzz louder, whispering that something's changed. The result is a homeostasis impulse, a push to reset, to flatten the peak, to pretend the whole thing never happened. The thermostat lives in the background of decisions. Think of your mind as a house with a stubborn thermostat, always sampling temperature and mood, never content with a tiny shift. If you surge past your old ceiling, the device nudges the room back toward the old draft. Dopamine rises briefly with achievement, then a subtle priming happens, a slowdown, a strayed out, a tempting shortcut. Small wins are amplified into a test of whether you deserve more. Big wins trigger a rollback more aggressively. The pattern isn't dramatic every time, but it is steady enough to keep you near the prior baseline. In practice, you sabotage not with fireworks but with quiet, sensible slippage, missed calls, late starts, and the uncanny talent for turning momentum into drift. The upper limit sits just above the thermostat's comfort zone, a psychological ceiling you're convinced you'll shatter only to slam into with a headlong stumble. Success becomes a megaphone for fear. If I'm really thriving, people might expect more from me, or I might outgrow the life I've learned to tolerate. Chaos is addictive in a cruelly efficient way. It sells you a rush that resembles growth but keeps you tethered to the familiar drama you think defines you. A promotion is celebrated with a flurry of energy, then the next week you quietly sabotage your own progress by overcommitting, then burning out, then retreating into old routines. Relationships mimic the pattern too. Intense flirting gives way to friction, because the unpredictability feels like identity, and identity is easier to defend than risk. Breaking the loop isn't a heroic leap. It's a slow, stubborn recalibration. Name the thermostat signals before they steer you off course. Track the moment you cross your own upper limit and respond with a deliberate pause, not a panic. Build in micro wins you can sustain without triggering the fear of too much happiness. Create buffers, public commitments, accountability partners, clear boundaries that make the shift feel safer rather than explosive. And yes, admit that chaos can be seductive. It's not moral failure to acknowledge it, just a reminder that your brain favors the drama it knows over the unknown calm you might deserve. Concept 2. The upper limit problem. Why you pick a fight with your partner exactly when everything is going well. The upper limit is a real thing, plain and stubborn. When life hands you a smooth stretch of calm and real progress, your nervous system often mutters, "Nice, but not safe," and you drift back toward familiar friction. The thermostat your mind runs on isn't calibrated for bliss. It's calibrated for provisionally uncomfortable normalcy. So when the relationship hits a sweet spot, you notice a small ache and decide to reheat the room with a fight. The result isn't an argument about groceries. It's a reset. The thermostat metaphor isn't cute fluff. Your brain travels by feedback loops, not fairy dust. If warmth climbs, your inner engineer twists the dial back toward neutral or even cool. Chaos becomes a shortcut to return to a known climate. The payoff feels quick, adrenaline, drama, the quick rush of being in motion, and the brain mistakes danger for vitality. You're not plotting a grand betrayal. You're giving your nervous system the same old texture it knows best. The pattern is seductive because it's a predictable high. It's not that you hate happiness. You fear the exposure that happiness requires. Internal scripts fuel the behavior. "I don't deserve this," whispers a tired belief. "I'll mess this up before someone else does," mutters another. These are not logical arguments so much as emotional weather reports. You're not choosing to be petty so much as choosing to stay in a lane where danger feels familiar and control feels tangible. The upper limit shows up as a tiny push toward a familiar pain, an old argument about a minor thing, a passive-aggressive gesture, a budget buster when you finally feel secure about money, a night out that spirals into jealousy and accusation. The pattern often hides in plain sight, a successful week at work, then a spill of resentment about a missing dinner invitation, a good morning text that becomes a fight about trust by the afternoon. It's maddeningly precise in its timing. Chaos is addictive in the brain's chemistry and in the stories you tell yourself. The brain releases dopamine in response to novelty and perceived threat, not to the quiet corners where love grows. So you chase the familiar spark, even if it's a tiny spark that only lights up your partner's annoyance and your own guilt. You confuse momentum with meaning and mistake the rush of chaos for life being lived fully. The upper limit isn't about willpower. It's about a deeply wired habit of staying emotionally safe by staying emotionally unstable. You're not sabotaging a relationship so much as sabotaging your own sense of safety by insisting that irritation is the natural habitat of love. If you want to interrupt the pattern, you start by noticing the signal before the flare. A simple pause can derail a potential reset. Breathe, label the feeling, and choose a response that doesn't collide with the relationship's momentum. Track your triggers the way a scientist tracks a reaction. What headspace you're in when the urge to argue shows up, what thought comes first, and what outcome you actually want versus what you're about to do. Small, manageable bets help. Agree to a 10-minute delay before responding. Write down what you fear, and test a kinder alternative. Rehearse vulnerability in tiny doses, so your system learns that warmth can be sustainable and not instantly fatal. Practical steps matter. Create boundaries that nudge the thermostat upward, not shatter it. Schedule moments of shared calm, the kind that don't devolve into a negotiation about who did what. Reinforce positive patterns with explicit feedback. When we handle this well, I feel closer to you, not if you mess this up, we are done. Reframe how you interpret success. It's not a trap or a trapdoor, it's a platform for growth. If you notice the urge to pull chaos into the room, name it and choose a constructive alternative. An honest check-in, a ritual of appreciation, a plan for dealing with conflict without letting it explode. The goal isn't perfection. It's teaching your nervous system that happiness can be a stable setting, not an occasional excursion into danger. The irony here isn't small. Your mind promises that chaos protects you from being seen as lucky, and your heart agrees, momentarily. In reality, chaos signs you up for a ceiling that won't rise unless you prove you can tolerate more warmth, not less. The upper limit is a stubborn instructor, but it's also a mirror. It reflects how you've learned to regulate love, fear, and worth. Pushing beyond it isn't a grand rebellion. It's a refusal to settle for the cheap thrill of a fight when the real work is learning to stay present with someone who wants you near in a good moment. If you stay curious, the pattern loosens. If you stay honest, the thermostat climbs, not to a fever pitch, but to a steady, livable warmth where harmony isn't the exception but the baseline. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that happiness isn't a cliff you fall off, but a room you renovate with someone you trust. Concept 3. Addiction to chaos. Peace feels boring to a traumatized brain. You create drama just to feel something. Trauma rewires the brain's reward and arousal systems, so quiet days can feel flat and safety can feel suspicious. The nervous system learned to crave stimulation, and chaos has proven to be a more reliable mood elevator than peace. Peace feels boring because the brain associates it with a lull in validation, danger, or meaning. The result is a stubborn pull toward drama, a self-soothing mechanism that keeps the familiar pain warm. Your psyche prefers the known smoke over the unknown fire of happiness, even when the smoke keeps burning you. Chaos is addictive in practical, concrete ways. When drama erupts, the brain dumps dopamine and adrenaline in bursts that feel alive, even if they're destructive. You get a quick hit from a crisis, a rush from power struggles, a sense of belonging from the storm you've created. The thermostat sits at a higher heat setting, so temperate rooms feel chilly and you turn up the thermostat again with a fresh episode of chaos. The irony is cruel. We chase intensity to numb fear, and the more intense the drama, the more we convince ourselves we are awake. Small, steady moments of calm are misread as threats to be avoided rather than opportunities to heal. The upper limit shows up as a sly guardrail. When something starts to go really well, more money, better relationships, a breakthrough at work, the brain panics about losing it or being uncomfortable with the change. So you find ways to cap that happiness at a familiar level, filming your own downfall just to reset the temperature. You might sabotage a project you've longed for, cancel a date at the last minute, or pick fights with people you care about to restore the old dynamic. It is not pure spite. It's a stubborn, automatic recoil toward the comfort zone you know, where the risks feel familiar and you feel vaguely in control. The paradox hides in plain sight. Your hunger for stability masquerades as a taste for freedom, while the cost is the same old mess you keep stepping back into. What helps is naming and rewriting the thermostat script. Track the moments when the urge to stir chaos spikes and label the feeling as a signal, not a command. Create pre-commitments that push you toward low-drama routines, short walks, 15 minutes of journaling, a chat with a trusted friend, before the spark of drama has a chance to catch. Build safe outlets for arousal that don't wreck progress, like intense workouts, competitive games, or creative projects with clear boundaries. Expand your comfort zone gradually, not with a heroic leap, but with consistent, boring, honest steps. And when the urge to derail rises, pause and ask what the brain is really trying to gain: connection, permission to feel, or a sense of control. If you answer honestly, the chaos loses some of its grip, and the room starts to feel like a tolerable, even peaceful place to live. Concept 4. The identity lag. You are trying to run new software, success, on old hardware, insecure identity. Identity lag shows up as a simple mismatch. You're chasing bigger outcomes while clinging to a self-concept built from past failures. You're trying to run new software, success, momentum, healthier routines, on hardware that's been sipping the same old scripts for years. The brain craves compatibility. It hates rewrites that threaten who you think you are, even if the old version comes with bugs. The result is a tug of war between ambition and identity, a tug that usually ends with the furniture rearranged into a familiar chaos you recognize. The thermostat is set low, and the room keeps heating up anyway. Your emotions point you toward more, toward growth, and then your nervous system snaps you back to a familiar temperature, calmly, stubbornly, predictably. A promotion arrives and your stomach drops, not because you're unworthy, but because the upgrade threatens the story you've lived inside. The upper limit kicks in with a sly wink. Once happiness edges beyond a certain ceiling you've learned to tolerate, the body finds a way to pull the plug. The pull feels like relief, but it's really a safety valve for an identity that's terrified of dissolving into something less controllable. Consider the concrete patterns this looks like in daily life. A professional who sabotages a key project by overcomplicating the plan, then complains that the team's not meeting expectations. A student who starts strong and then whispers to themselves that they aren't really the type who can keep this up, so they drift back into procrastination. A partner who creates drama after a breakthrough conversation, as if chaos is the only thing that keeps the current self intact. These moves aren't random. They're ritualized behaviors that protect an insecure sense of self by keeping life in a familiar loop of pain and risk reduction. The chaos isn't just noise. It's a habit that feeds the illusion of being in control. You can see how this becomes addictive. Chaos provides a quick spike of adrenaline and a narrative of resourcefulness. Look at me handling the mess. And that rush becomes the counterfeit proof that you're still the same person who can survive, not the person who can thrive. Predictable pain is easier to manage than unpredictable potential. The mind maps danger in the form of old scars, not in the shape of real opportunities. So you drift toward the edges of your comfort zone, back toward the safe familiar ground where the identity feels intact, even if the ground is crumbling. The result is a paradox. The pursuit of greatness triggers a reflex that makes greatness feel dangerous, which is exactly why you stay stuck. Small rewrites beat heroic overhauls every time. Start by recognizing the specific upgrade you're attempting. What would success look like in your own terms, not a fantasy version of it? Then test a microchange that doesn't demand a wholesale identity renovation. Wake up 15 minutes earlier to plan one meaningful step for the day. Deliver one precise contribution in a meeting instead of waiting for permission. Choose one task you'd normally delay and finish it before you allow yourself to enjoy downtime. Each tiny win nudges the self-image toward a slightly bigger version of you, a version that can tolerate more success without freaking out. Pair these with external accountability, someone who notices when you revert to old patterns and calls you out with a grin, not a sermon. To shift the identity lag, you've got to rehearse a new script enough to feel real. Give yourself a plausible story about who you are becoming. Not a flawless hero, but a reliable person who can handle growth without surrendering to chaos. Track triggers, the moments when fear of being seen as less arises, the times you choose the old pain in place of unknown happiness. Reframe success so it aligns with your core values rather than threatens them. See it as a practice, not an arrival. The aim isn't perfection, but compatibility between the self you claim and the life you're attempting to build. In the end, you don't conquer the old hardware by shouting at it. You gradually install compatible software and let the thermostat rise bit by bit, without the dramatic exits. Chaos will still flirt, but you'll learn to reply with steady, small choices instead of last-minute meltdowns. Concept 5. Fear of success. Failure is safe because you have no responsibilities. Success is scary. Many people fear success because it demands more responsibility and visibility, and the mind clings to the safety of routine. Failure stays comfortable, a familiar landscape full of excuses and predictable flaws. Your internal thermostat sits at a precise heat, and when success nudges the room toward a higher temperature, the system kicks in to cool you back to your old climate. The promotion arrives with more meetings, more questions, more eyes on you, and suddenly the urge to retreat becomes powerful, almost charming in its predictability. The upper limit, that sly, stubborn voice, acts up and you retreat to the old familiar pain, because at least you know how to navigate it. The lure of chaos is not accidental. Success demands you expand your identity, and expanding hurts. You worry about what happens when you're no longer the go-to person who fixes things with a sigh and a shrug. You fear the pressure of being seen, the expectations that come with merit, the risk of friendship friction as your status shifts. Chaos gives you a story where you control the plot through dramatic twists. It feels like you're choosing, when in truth you're choosing the soothing predictability of a known disaster. You surface tiny sabotages, missed deadlines, unfinished tasks, half-baked launches, that feel like tests you pass by failing just enough to stay relevant in a familiar way. It's not heroic, it's habit disguised as revolt. The upper limit swells with triumph and then collapses the scene to its baseline, and you pat yourself on the back for resisting a glow you've learned to fear. To break free, treat the thermostat as a tool, not a prison. Begin with micro-choices that fit your current identity instead of demanding a leap into unknown territory. Define what success really looks like for you today, not the version your boss or your mother would approve of. Set tiny bets you can win without rewriting your entire life, like finishing one critical task ahead of schedule or taking a single restorative step toward a bigger project. Create an accountability container that doesn't punish you for slipping but holds you gently accountable. Weekly check-ins with someone who won't pretend your excuses are cute. Practice self-compassion as a practical technique, not a consolation prize, and notice the triggers, the people, the times, the assumptions, that push you toward the dramatic rescue of chaos. When the urge to derail rises, name the pattern aloud, and choose the next small, responsible action instead. Chaos, after all, is addictive in the same way a loud movie soundtrack can be addictive. It drowns out ambiguity and makes you feel alive even when the plot is destroying you. The upper limit thrives in the moment you hit a milestone and automatically inventories the costs, turning celebration into warning signs. You don't have to rip out your old life to grow. You only have to tune it so that the next step feels like a small, safe challenge rather than a leap into an unfamiliar storm. The more you practice aligning actions with a sustainable sense of success, the more predictable your progress becomes. Then the room stays comfortable, and the drama fades into the background where it belongs. Concept 6. The I don't deserve it virus. Imposter syndrome is the ultimate sabotage tool. Imposter syndrome isn't a cute quirk. It's a stubborn, repeatable pattern that turns self-worth into a revolving door of luck and fear. The I don't deserve it virus grows when achievement triggers a louder inner critic than applause ever does. It's not just about feeling nervous before a big moment. It's about treating every win as provisional, every compliment as a trap, every new door as a possible exposure. People who perform well aren't immune. They're often the prime carriers because the stakes keep rising and the voice inside keeps insisting that the bench is where they belong. You notice the flaws more than the wins, and you decide to prove you're still not allowed to be at the table. Chaos is addictive in a warped way. The thermostat in the mind keeps your emotional climate almost comically constant, unless something nudges you past the comfortable setting. Then the upper limit flexes its muscles and you slip back to baseline with a flurry of self-sabotage. A coder ships a feature and immediately starts overthinking every detail, delaying critical reviews, or rewriting the same line of code until the deadline becomes a moving target. A salesperson lands a big client and, in the next breath, shrinks the deal by nitpicking terms or downgrading the value of the contract. An academic posts a solid paper and then decides the conclusions aren't rigorous enough, retreating into another round of experiments that stall the publication. It's not bravado. It's a reflex designed to keep happiness, success, and risk in a cozy, familiar temperature. The virus feeds on a simple truth that most people pretend they don't notice. Thriving disrupts the status quo of pain we're used to. The brain learns that drama, even negative drama, is a predictable motion, and predictability feels safer than the ambiguity of genuine reward. The pattern looks like clever restraint at first, careful planning, perfectionist pacing, and meticulous control. Over time it becomes a ritual. Prepare forever, ship never, polish endlessly, and interpret any praise as temporary luck or a near miss you nearly blew. The result is a quiet form of chaos that feels almost earned because it requires effort. It keeps the loop spinning. More effort, less joy, the conviction that you almost deserved it, followed by a neat synthesis of guilt and relief when you retreat back to the old, familiar pain. Strategies don't cure this overnight, but they do rewire the thermostat. Name the virus every time it shows up and give it a silly nickname you won't mind misplacing. Track concrete wins the way you track vital signs. One line of evidence that you did good work and stood tall under pressure. Pre-commit to a next actionable step that has real consequences if you skip it, even if the step is tiny, like sending a single email or logging a commitment to a next milestone. Practice accepting praise in a way that doesn't require you to audition for it. Simply say thank you and note what you did to earn it, no downplaying. Build small routines that test the upper limit idea. Set a modest target you can hit consistently, then raise it by a tiny amount after you celebrate the last one. And above all, reframe value from inborn worth to earned impact. You're not worthy because you exist. You're worthy because you showed up and did the work. Chaos isn't a moral failing. It's a stubborn, seductive pattern that rewards itself with adrenaline and the illusion of control. The challenge isn't to banish fear entirely, but to redraw your map so that success isn't a signal to retreat, and pain isn't a cue to overcorrect. It's about choosing the next honest move over the easiest familiar pushback. When you notice the I don't deserve it virus flickering, you can pivot toward the next measured action, the next small risk with a clear, finite payoff. The mind loves drama, but your life benefits from clarity. The more you practice that, the less power the imposter has, and the more your real competence starts to stand on its own, unmasked and unnegotiated. Concept 7. Rewiring the circuit. How to sit with the discomfort of things going well. Your happiness thermostat is calibrated to a familiar level of pain, and those spikes you feel when things go well aren't just nerves catching a break. They're signals from a brain that learned long ago to treat novelty as a risk and serenity as a trap. The upper limit is not a myth, it's a reflex. When success pushes past a comfortable ceiling, you cue a little sabotage to bring the needle back down. It looks like subtle procrastination after a promotion, or a habit of picking fights when a partnership starts to work. It's annoying, yes, and it's stubbornly consistent, like gravity with feelings. Rewiring the circuit means sitting with the discomfort of buoyancy without turning it into a crisis. Your physiology will protest the absence of familiar chaos. Your heart rate might quicken, thoughts may race, and the urge to downplay, sabotage, or retreat will feel loud. Don't listen to the loudness. Label the sensation, describe it, and keep choosing the positive state anyway. Compliments will land with a sting. Plans to improve may feel risky, and that's exactly the point. The nervous system learns through exposure, not by pretending the feeling isn't there. A simple move is to acknowledge the good without shrinking from it. Say, this is pleasant, this is earned, and I'm continuing regardless of the itch to retreat. Little experiments count. Finish a task with less self-flagellation, take a small risk you'd normally dodge. Notice how long the glow lasts and how quickly the fear settles if you ride it out. Chaos is addictive, and that's not a moral flaw, it's a maladaptive habit pattern. The brain can mistake drama for control because uncertainty floods the reward system with novelty and drama-tied adrenaline. The upper limit invites a familiar script. If something goes smoothly, I must counterbalance with intensity elsewhere. You may unconsciously crave the friction of a heated argument, a looming deadline, or a crisis to preempt the quiet. But the payoff is illusory, the relief is temporary, and the cost is a steady erosion of trust in yourself. The antidote is boringly practical. Create a predictable scaffold around success. Map out what going well looks like in concrete terms, and build routines that sustain that feeling without amplifying the risk of a fall. Here are ways to rewire without pretending the discomfort doesn't exist. First, normalize the experience of positive emotion by naming it aloud and then continuing with the next step. Second, broaden your safety net. Reserve bandwidth for the good times with small, incremental commitments that you can maintain. Third, design a success ritual, a quick sequence after a win that marks progress and reduces the urge to sabotage, such as a 6-second reflection, a brief celebration, and a plan for the next milestone. Fourth, create controlled exposure to higher stakes gradually rather than in one explosive leap. It trains the nervous system that it can tolerate more without collapsing into chaos. Fifth, enlist accountability that respects your autonomy, someone who checks in on progress, not on your self-criticism. Sixth, tame the internal critic by shifting language from I should to I'm choosing, which preserves agency and reduces resentment. Seventh, cultivate a safe container for emotion. Anchoring practices like breathwork, body scans, or a brisk walk help you stay present as the mood shifts. The metaphor of the thermostat matters here. Your mind slides between warmth and burn, and you mistake the heat of success for a personal threat. The upper limit isn't a fixed wall. It's a moving boundary shaped by history, mood, and habit. When you learn to reside with the good without flipping into chaos, you're teaching your system a new reflex. Positive states can be stable, not dangerous. It's not about denying fear. It's about choosing continuity over chaos, even when the brain throws a tantrum. The result isn't a sudden saintliness. It's a steadier, more reliable version of you who can hold achievement without collapsing into old patterns. So yes, the contradiction remains sharp. You want better outcomes, yet you cling to pain as a familiar translator of safety. You're not broken for finding comfort in known pain. You're human, and learning to rewire requires stubborn, consistent practice. Sit with the good long enough to notice what it feels like to stay present with success. The more often you tolerate that sensation without immediate self-sabotage, the less your inner weather defaults to storm mode. Over time, the thermostat nudges upward, not because you've earned every ounce of hardship, but because you've proven to your system that rest and growth can coexist. And that, finally, is how you rewire the circuit, one honest moment at a time, one small win after another, without letting the familiar pain hijack the map. Stop fighting the old you. Start building the new one. Facts first. Self-sabotage isn't a mysterious flaw in your character. It's a repeatable pattern your brain uses to protect a self-image you still believe in, even when that image hurts. Your brain loves predictability, so it runs a little internal thermostat, the thermostat that keeps your emotional climate within a familiar band. When life nudges you towards something better, that thermostat fights back, pulling the plug on momentum with procrastination, excuses, or a rash crisis. You end up in the same cycles because the system prizes containment over growth, comfort over risk, sameness over possibility. It's not a conspiracy. It's a habit with very loud consequences. Stop fighting the old you. Start building the new one. Trying to erase the old pattern without reconfiguring who you think you are is like trying to repaint a room while the walls still smell of the old paint. The truth is harsher than a pep talk. Identity is the engine, not the accessory. You sustain your current range of experience because you defend a narrative that says, in effect, I know how to handle conflict this way, even if the result is the same disappointment I've known forever. The upper limit shows up here as a stubborn rule you don't notice until it bites. Happiness or progress appears, and you unconsciously pull back, insisting that familiar discomfort is safer than unfamiliar ease. A promotion arrives, a relationship deepens, a new routine starts, and suddenly you're sabotaging the moment with a self-made crisis or a familiar pattern of self-critique. The joke is cruel and true. Chaos feels oddly comforting because it's predictable in its own way. To rewire this, you don't crush the old self into oblivion. You redefine the way the self shows up under pressure. The practical move is to shift identities, not just to change consequences. Ask yourself who the version of you is that would handle this new situation without drama, without self-doubt masquerading as humility. Then anchor that person with tiny, repeatable actions that align with the story you want to live. That's how you stretch the thermostat upward. You grant yourself permission to win in small, doable ways, and you extend the range bit by bit so the new behavior starts to feel normal. Implementation's intentions help here. When the situation arises, a specific plan follows, and the plan reduces the space for old impulses to intervene. Environment matters too. Move the friction away from the old pattern and place clear cues for the new one in your daily life. You want to be the person who shows up early, steadies commitments, and follows through? Design reminders, cues, and routines that don't rely on willpower alone. Chaos is addictive in a grimly funny way. It delivers a rush, a quick dopamine spike, a sense of control precisely when life feels out of control. The problem isn't that you crave excitement, it's that you crave the relief of relief, avoidance dressed up as autonomy. The upper limit loves to pretend you're steering toward growth, only to pull you back with a single loud crisis that restores the old equilibrium. This isn't a moral failing, it's a hydration problem for your self-concept. You keep drinking from the same glass because it's familiar, even if it's empty or spiked with bitterness. Recognize the pattern, name it, and you've taken away some of its power. Then choose a different glass, a glass that requires you to show up as someone who can handle more. The practical path is stubbornly simple. Stop refighting the old you and start building the new one. Calibrate your thermostat by expanding your comfort zone with gentle, persistent steps that make the next move easier, not harder. Align your surroundings with the identity you want to wear. Remove the temptations of the old routine and install signals that invite the new behavior. Create rituals that certify you as the kind of person who acts, not as the kind who hesitates. When you stumble, don't scorch the earth. Extract a lesson and adjust. Progress isn't a straight line, and that's not a joke you'll enjoy hearing, but it's the truth that saves you from years of the same mistakes dressed in new excuses. If you want to stop fighting the old you must start building the new one, and you can begin right after you finish the sentence. Look, you're not broken. You're simply negotiating with a stubborn thermostat. The room you keep living in isn't the result of clever schemes from your past so much as a default setting your brain swore by long ago. Keep the pain familiar, keep the drama predictable, and pretend you're in control of the thermostat even as you're sweating through the same mistakes. The upper limit isn't some cartoonish demon, it's your brain's favorite safety feature. It warns when happiness might edge you somewhere unfamiliar, and then it sabotages the progress with a shrug and a familiar habit. Here's the direct summary you've probably ignored while chasing the next bright idea. First, self-sabotage isn't mostly about fear of failure. It's fear of change and the unknown, dressed up in excuses. Second, the thermostat and the upper limit are real. Your happiness meter has a preferred band, and whenever you nudge past it, old patterns reappear to pull you back down. Third, chaos is addictive in a perverse way. The adrenaline rush of spinning your wheels feels somehow safer than the uncertain effort of growth, and your brain will choose the familiar mess over the potentially better but unpredictable clarity on the other side. Fourth, your identity story, I'm the procrastinator, I quit, I messed this up, acts like a self-fulfilling prophecy your nervous system trusts more than any pep talk. Fifth, the antidote isn't just willpower, it's tiny, boring, repeatable steps, pre-commitment that another person knows about, micro-habits you can actually sustain, naming triggers before they pull you into the old pattern, and celebrating tiny wins the way you celebrate a big score you didn't earn. Sixth, a pinch of self-compassion helps you stay in the arena long enough to practice. Judgment is a luxury you can't afford if you want long-term change. If you've stayed with me this far, you're not indifferent to the loop you're in. You're curious enough to test whether the loop is actually a leash. You want chaos? Fine, swap it for controlled chaos. Small experiments, predictable consequences, real data on what actually shifts your mood. You're tired of being surprised by your own sabotages, and you know deep down that growth isn't a dramatic jailbreak but a quiet, stubborn retuning of the thermostat. So, here's the call to action, no fluff. Commit to one tiny change this week, tell someone you trust about it, and report back in the comments what your trigger was and what your counter habit will be. If you want more, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with a person who keeps saying tomorrow. And stay tuned, because next time we map out a concrete 21-day reset to rewire your defaults so the unknown starts looking a little less terrifying and a little more like opportunity, without the drama you're used to. We'll break down the exact routines, the exact language to use with yourself, and the exact moments to pause before you sabotage. We might not ban chaos, but we will prove it isn't the only way to feel alive. If you're willing to keep dialing the dial, we'll get you closer to that unknown happiness you keep pretending isn't for you.